Of course, a man checks the tail skid, too. Listen for a thump, which is a signal that the retracting screw stops have made contact. That's it. All through this operation, the red landing gear light has been on. It'll stay on until the gear is dropped again and locked. Joe is testing the landing gear warning system. When the throttle is at closed position, a horn starts blowing. The boys check the gear to make sure they're in snug. Then Mac warns them to stay clear and signals Joe. Joe puts the landing gear switch at down position and will hold it there until the gear are completely extended. The boys listen just as carefully as they did before. Too much noise indicates trouble in the retracting assemblies. And again that thump, which says the bottom stops have made contact and the gear is fully extended. At this point, the red landing gear light goes off and the 3 greens come on. Now, when Joe closes those throttles, there's not a sound out of the horn. So it's all right to go ahead and test the landing gear doors. Pete and Shorty connect the cannon plug to each door motor in the main wheel wells. And Mac takes care of the nose wheel door. He must replace the mechanism and the 2 bolts which fasten it to the door. And since he doesn't want the doors to smash into the nose jack, he removes the plate from the aft corners of the nose wheel doors. All right. Now let's bring her up again to test the operation of the doors. There go the gear, just as they did before. Watch the doors when they close. There are the nose wheel doors folding up. There's a main wheel well closing. And another. All in good working order. So Mac calls Joe to check the emergency landing gear operation. He throws the landing gear transfer switch to emergency and pulls this cable, which releases the doors. Then he goes over to the forward entrance door and opens it up so that he can get at the emergency nose gear switch. This cover comes off fast and easy, and there's the switch. He keeps it on until he's sure the emergency motor works all right. Halfway down is enough. 1 down and 2 to go. Now he moves on to the main gear emergency switches on the aft side of the pressure bulkhead. Here's one of them. Joe snaps it to down and keeps it that way. It's turning smoothly, and the gear extends in good order. He operates the other main gear emergency switch in exactly the same way. Halfway down is enough to tell him the motor's okay. And Joe is back where he started, turning the transfer switch to normal. And bringing the gear all the way down. Now, Mac has something to do. Remember? The plates on the corners of the nose wheel doors have to be replaced. After that's done, Mac can go back to the big job, lowering the airplane to the ground. He must watch each jack closely and see that they're all operated at the same time, and that one doesn't run ahead of the other. Yes, they've got to be as careful in lowering the plane as they were in lifting it. Slowly, evenly, the wheels touch the ground. And Annie is back on her own sturdy legs again. When the plane is completely off jacks, the parking brakes are kept on until the blocks are put in place. And then Pete and Shorty can start reinflating the shock struts.
The main shock strut air valve is up here. First, you gotta unscrew the filler plug. We want to know how much hydraulic fluid there is in there, and the only way to find out is to open her up. Need a flashlight to see inside. Good. The fluid is right up to the level of the hole, which is just where it's supposed to be. So the filler plug goes right back on again. Here's Pete with the air compressor. Just lay that hose up there on the tire where it'll be handy when I need it, Pete. As soon as I get this valve cover off, we can start inflating the strut. Okay. Now the air hose. Screws right on and stays there. All right, Pete. Start pumping. It goes up slow. The distance from center to center of torsion link bearings should be 13¼ inches. When Pete figures it's up high enough, he takes a measure. 13¼ Okay. Now Pete can inspect the shock strut. He's got to be sure the strut is clean. There's some grease on there, so he wipes her down with a cloth. While he's doing that, he keeps an eye out for leaks. Easy to tell a leak on a shock strut. There's red oil inside. This strut's all right now. After the two main shock struts have been inflated and checked, we got to give the nose shock strut exactly the same treatment, except for one big difference, or should I say, little difference. You see, the distance from center to center of these torsion link bearings should be 10 inches. Uh-huh, 10 inches. And we don't need any more air. Besides shock struts, there's more work to be done on the nose gear. So while I'm getting the air compressor hose out of the way, Pete comes in to take over.
Here's the shimmy damper. Indicator rod must be up to the marking notch. Now the centering mechanism. Just rip that safety wire off and you can get at those screws. And once all the screws off, you can take the cover off and go to work on the inside of that mechanism. You guessed it, more cleaning. The cam and roller get the business with a solvent-moistened cloth. While I'm at it, I see that they're in good condition. And now the cam and roller have to get a light coat of grease. The same kind as what we packed the wheel bearings with. Remember? ANG3. Spread it over very thin. Then Shorty hands me the Zerk gun and I shoot some more of that same grease into the Zerk fitting on this centering mechanism. That's enough. Back goes the lid. And back go the screws. Every one of them. Yeah. And back goes some new safety wiring on all those screws. Shorty's busy, too. He's down there taking the dust covers off so's he can check inflation of the nose wheel tires. You measure from the center line of the axle to the ground. If the length is 15 3/10 inches, you can leave that tire alone and put the cover back. By now, I got a new job. Checking the normal and emergency motors in the nose wheel well. Mountings tight, electrical connections firmly attached and safety. Up here's the retracting screw housing. Let's see if there's enough grease inside. Yeah, looks okay. 2 of these holes to check. Now let's take a look at the AN connectors of those motors. Cannon plugs feel all right. And now the limit switches. There's an upper and lower limit switch box. They both get the same inspection. This is the upper one. The thing you want to make sure of in here is that there's no grease inside. That goes for oil, too. Wiring looks fine. So I can close it up. Don't worry, I won't forget to safety that cover after I get it on. Next on the program is Zerk fittings. Lots of them. There's 18 fittings in all on the nose wheel gear. All of them have to be shot with that ANG3 grease. It's very easy to miss a fitting or two, so stay sharp. Get every single one of them. And keep your eyes open for any loose, missing, or unsafetied bolts. Check those doors over good and make sure everything's in A1 condition before you leave that wheel well.
The main landing gear get just about the same check as the nose wheel. 23 3/10 is the measure for correct tire inflation on this wheel. Normal and emergency motor check is a repetition of what Pete did in the nose wheel. He checks them for the same things: security of mounting and bolts. They all must be tight. He covers all the electrical connections. AN connector. There's another motor in the main wheel wells, the one that operates the landing gear doors. That too must be checked for security and connections. And when he's through with that, he reaches for his Zerk gun. The Zerk fitting on this retracting screw gets a half a dozen spurts of grease. That lubricates the worm gear. From then on, it's a repeat of the nose wheel operation. First, the limit switch boxes. Pete sees that it's in good condition and feels around for any grease or oil which doesn't belong in there. Then, when the limit switch cover is back on and safetied, he gives every one of those fittings the works with his Zerk gun. There are 16 fittings on each main landing gear assembly. When they've all been hypoed with grease, Pete checks over the general condition of the wheel well. Then the door retracting screws. The only new thing here is the emergency release cables for the doors. And then Pete makes sure the doors themselves are in good shape. Well, one nose gear and two main gear finished. And now the tail skid.
What? Hey, we'll inspect that when we get back to our empennage section. We go section by section, don't we? Well, we'll cover the exterior fuselage now, but we'll start up front. First, the pitot heads. Right here. They gotta be checked for security of mounting, and they gotta be cleaned out. A piece of soft copper takes care of the drain and the rest of it. Dust and dirt can foul up a pitot head pretty bad. Now the two CO2 bottles in the aft corners of the nose wheel. Safety discs aren't broken, so I'm sure the bottles aren't empty. Before you take a bottle off, you gotta wire the handles down for safety. You do this even if you think the bottles are empty. Can't take any chances of them blowing up in your face when you break the connections. These bottles here are a kind of long-distance fire department for the engine, and you've got to check them very carefully. On a B-29, or any airplane for that matter, Fire Prevention Week is every week. Now that this bottle is down, we're going to weigh it. It's usually a base job, but I'll do it with a hand scale. If any bottle weighs 4 ounces less than the stenciled weight on it, you've got to replace it with a full bottle. This one's okay. So back it goes. Be sure you put each one of these bottles back in place securely. Get the connections good and tight, too. And don't be lazy. After it's on, give it a shake just to make doubly sure she's securely mounted.
And now, to finish up in the nose wheel well, Pete and Shorty remove these two access plates. The space inside is under the floor of the forward pressurized compartment, and there are a number of things there which require a very careful inspection. Cable pulleys, brackets, wiring, tubing, and control cables. After tensions have been taken, feel the cables with a cloth to catch any broken strands there might be. Remember, shouldn't be more than 6 to an inch. Not until everything in there has been inspected do the men close up shop. And you know Shorty. He's always got to take that final look around. Now that Pete is through in there, he can head back to the tail section. On the way, he goes along the fuselage looking for signs of damage. Things like loose or missing rivets, cracks, breaks, tears, and so forth. And here's where he finally stops to check on the tail skid. The operation of the skid, you'll remember, was checked during the landing gear test. All Pete has to do is clean it up with a solvent-dipped cloth and check its condition. While he's wiping off the strut, he looks for signs of leaking oil. Red oil, of course. And he doesn't forget to check the canvas cover up there. It must be fastened all around. By now, Shorty is finished in the nose wheel well, so he goes back to the tail too. He's bringing the Zerk gun with him. Those Zerk fittings on the tail skid will need some shots of grease. There are 5 fittings in all on the tail gear mechanism. 3 here, and 3 up above in the tail section. Each one gets a squirt of that special ANG3 lubricant. While Shorty is taking care of this, Pete runs up to the interior tail section to check the air load of the tail skid shock strut. He brings an ordinary tire gauge along with him for this job. First, he takes the cover off the valve. Then he checks the air pressure with his gauge. 75 pounds. That's enough. And that winds him up here. But does it? Isn't there something you've forgotten, Pete? Sure. There are 2 Zerk fittings here. Better get that Zerk gun from Shorty. And now the boys are in the final lap in this section-by-section relay, the empennage. Shorty's been inspecting the horizontal stabilizer, and Pete will get the elevator.
I look specially for wrinkles. A wrinkle in the fabric can mean damage that might lead up to, well, to an elevator rib failing in a tight spot. Shorty is right below, checking up on the elevator hinges, wherever they show. He's got to feel the mounting to make sure it's secure, and he's got to be convinced that everything in there is in good condition before he closes up. Me, I'm satisfied with the elevator fabric now, so we'll put it through its paces. That's right, Charlie. Tell Mac to work those elevator controls for me. The elevators ought to move easy, without binding and without too much noise. 2 or 3 times full travel ought to tell you what you want to know. Okay, Mac, stop her. Here's one elevator that operates smooth. Now I'm going up there to the fin and rudder. In the meantime, you can watch Shorty inspect the trim tab control linkage. Sure, he wants to see that it's in good general condition. But there are a few special things. Universal joint mounting. And the cable has to be wound properly on the drum. Next, Shorty gives the elevator tabs a once-over down there while I'm climbing up here. He's got to make sure they haven't got any more play than the TO allows. Another skin check for me. This time on the fin. We just can't afford to let any dents or cracks go unnoticed. Then the rudder. No tears, loose fabric, or wrinkles allowed here. All right, now I can get Mac to put the rudder through full travel. Getting in touch with Mac from back here is like calling for the corporal of the guard. You got to get a guy to repeat all calls. Mac operates the rudder pedal. And she moves right through. Same thing that goes for the elevator goes for the rudder. No binding, not too much noise. Well, sounds good. So that's enough, Mac.
Next, the boys open the doors to the rudder trim tab controls. Shorty takes care of the one in which the cable drum is located, and Pete handles the bottom one to get at the rudder hinge. Let's see how Shorty inspects what's inside of his door. He checks to see that the cable is properly wound on the cable drum. Then he feels those cables to be sure they're in good shape. He must be satisfied with everything. And Pete, too, must be satisfied with what's inside his door. Hinge shaft, bolts, connection, and the hinge itself. All of it must be tight. Yes, it's a slow process, but an important one, this checkup of all the controls. And by the way, this is a good place to mention that those access doors must be firmly fastened. Pete looks over the rudder trim tab and hinges. He inspects all the visible parts of the hinges and tests the connections for security of mounting. And when he's through with that, he goes to work on the rudder quadrants.
Look at all those screws I gotta loosen to get that door off. I could save myself a lot of work by just not checking that quadrant, couldn't I? But try and catch me doing it. Now let's see what we got in there. This is the quadrant. The cable's gotta be attached snug. And look for loose or missing rivets. Hinge bolt feels all right. Bonding okay. And the quadrant doesn't seem bent or broken anywhere. The rudder locking pin has to be in good shape and mounted right. Spring and cable, they're attached okay. If there'd been any loose stuff in there, I'd have gotten rid of it. Anything laying on top of the quadrant is liable to jam it up bad. We just got 2 more access doors left now. One for the rudder servo, the other for the rudder cable. That's Shorty's job. Take it away, Shorty.
Here goes for some very fancy inspecting. The door I just took off is to the rudder servo motor. This one is to the rudder cable. You gotta watch me pretty close now. Once I get started on that motor, there's a lot of things to do. First, you remove the Zerk fitting. But don't get the idea we put grease in there. It needs oil. 4 or 5 drops of clear, thin machine gun oil. There's another bearing that gets a drop of oil. But you can't do it until you've got the cover off. When you've unscrewed this nut on top, just lift the cover right off, and there she is. This motor's got 2 brushes that have to be taken out and measured. If they're worn down to less than 3/4 of an inch, you have to replace them. This brush is all right. So let's look at the other one. I'm out of luck. This one measures okay too. So it goes right back. And the cover goes right back. And there you are. Rudder servo motor inspected. Rudder cable next. Here you have to use a tensiometer. We want to be sure this cable's rigged to the correct tension. Okay. Now, what does it say on the chart? The tension called for is 90 pounds. I got 94, but that's okay, because 10 pounds under or over 90 is passable. Of course, you've got to check the condition of the cable itself. No trouble here. So that ends it.
It certainly does, Shorty. And that finishes this whole big part of the 50-hour inspection. Wings, landing gear, hydraulic systems, exterior fuselage, and empennage. Plenty of work for Pete and Shorty. The bare facts of the story will be written up in Max Form 41B. But the real story of the work they did will be told later, in the air, where a good, thorough inspection job pays off.